Hello, and welcome to Travel Stories Unpacked, the podcast where we talk about all things travel, from the silly to the serious and everywhere in between. So if you love hearing different stories about travel and all the opinions that go along with that, then you have come to the right place. And I am your host, Ashley Newton. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending some of your time with us today. We really appreciate it. And for this very special episode, we are going to talk about traveling for music tours. So if you've ever had a band that you've loved and really just thought, hey, I want to hit the road and I want to follow them on all of these stops, we're going to be diving into that today with someone who has done it. So our guest for the show is Miss Kate Wiltrout. So welcome to the show, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. So who is the music act that you have followed around?
So the biggest one that I've done is Dead & Company. So that is the most recent reincarnation of the Grateful Dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also followed Billy Strings around for a brief moment. And then I also have another tour planned for this summer to follow a band called King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.
Love it, but it also sounds like the made-up name from Kimmy Schmidt, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Did you ever watch that show?
I have not seen that show, but I definitely, the first time I saw their name pop up on something, I was like, no way.
Is this real?
No way this is gonna be good either. Like, I really didn't think it was gonna be good music, and then I started listening to it, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll go see what's up about that.
So are all of these bands in the same sort of genre?
So they call it jam bands, and jam bands essentially get like an almost like cult-like following. It almost feels at a certain point like you're following a circus, because you'll start seeing the same people at different shows, and you'll be like pointing them out, and you'll be like, oh, that guy was at Cincinnati, and like we sat next to that guy in Indiana. Like, it's kind of crazy how it all like goes together. Like, so the band genre in general though, it's just like just old hippie music. And then they're doing most recent like reincarnations on it. So I would say it's more like alternative rocky. It kind of gets a little psyche with some of the bands. Dead & Company in particular, though, is just like old rock music that gets a little jammy. That's like the only way I can really describe it. Like, they just go on and on and on and on with certain parts. And it's enjoyable when you're in a crowd setting like that, because you know, when you're at a concert, you don't want a song that you love to end. They don't end it. They just keep it going. So
sounds incredible, honestly.
It's a lot of fun. It really is.
So are you a Dead & Company fan that wears the Deadhead label, or do you not like feel like that accurately describes you?
I feel like it's easier to just say I'm a Deadhead, because otherwise, like, it's just fun to be a part of the community, because like that's really what it is at the end of the day. Like, they have shakedowns outside of all of the shows, and a shakedown is essentially like a little flea market, and that's the best way to describe it.
Really? Okay.
So what they'll do is, like, vendors will pay their way through an entire tour just like selling stuff out on the lot before the show starts. So they'll get their tickets that way. They'll do a trade for maybe if somebody has an extra ticket. They call it like a miracle. You'll see people walking around the lot with a thumb up, like a hand up like this, like going, looking for a miracle, and they're looking for somebody to just give them a like $300 ticket for free, and people do it. Like, they'll just give them free tickets. It's all a part of like the Deadhead community. So when you start to feel like you're a part of that, and you start having conversations with people around you, that's where I'm more of like, yeah, I'm a Deadhead. Like, I wouldn't say I'm that heavily into it, but I would say that like when people ask me what kind of music I enjoy, I go, oh, I'm a Deadhead, because it's just easier to round it out that way.
Gotcha. That's so interesting. So there's lots of different layers that sort of exist within this community.
Yes.
So did you feel like you were already a part of it before you decided that you were going to follow them along tour?
No.
Or
No.
Okay, so what made you like wake up one day and be like, this is what I want to do?
So it definitely came down to the person that I was dating at the time. He was really interested in them. But that being said, as soon as he started to show me the music and we went to the first couple shows together, it kind of became more of like, I just really like this community. Like, I've been to quite a few shows before this. I have always enjoyed going to live music concerts, but it just felt different being in that crowd. I've been down, like, I went to Lollapalooza, and I've been to a bunch of other concerts for, like, 21 Pilots was a big one I followed for a little bit too. I saw them like 5 times. But at the end of the day, those kinds of shows, you're fighting with people the entire time. Like, you're just fighting to have your own space in the pit or the crowd or wherever you are.
Yeah.
And then I went to the shows that are dead-based. There's a lot of live local bands in Cleveland. And then actually seeing Dead and Company in person, the crowd, I've never seen that many people get up and actually dance. I've never seen that many people there strictly just for the music. It's really fun to be a part of it. People will give you stuff for free, like pins and hats and stuff, just to make sure that everybody feels like they're encompassed in it. So that's kind of what swept me up and brought me into enjoying it so much, especially with the shakedown scene outside. You get to buy cool stuff. You get to see a bunch of handmade product that people have spent all year putting together to sell specifically for this event. Just follow them on tour. People will put away like months worth of product just planning on selling it for that 3-month stretch that they get to follow Dead and Company on tour. So it's really fun to be a part of that community and see all the work people put into it, just to have the moments where you get to hear your favorite song that's typically like a 5-minute playthrough, and all of a sudden now it's like a 10-minute super psyche, like the moon is out shining, and they get to enjoy it just in that moment. They've waited all year for that just one song, and now it's 12 minutes or whatever, and they get to just soak in it and be in it and be grateful that's why they're there.
Yeah, so I have a lot of questions about sort of the logistics of this.
Yes.
So how do you plan or arrange? I'm thinking like your transportation, like your accommodations, like where you're staying. Are you like winging this as you go, or did you plan it out?
So it all starts by making sure you have a ticket first.
Ah, yeah, I guess I should have started there.
That is when you get into the pre-sales. So pre-sale, it's totally plausible to go in there with no plan at all, no ticket, no nothing, just transportation, and people do it. But that's not how I prefer to travel. I don't want to show up to a show and not know if I can actually get in the show.
Yeah, I mean, I would never. I'd be so nervous.
What it is there's a couple different ways you can go about it. You can just get tickets for the shows and just drive through all of them. There's a couple different campgrounds at the different venues. There's a lot of venues that are amphitheaters outdoors. And so if it's in a rural area, there's campsites. You can do a cabin. You can do a hotel room. I have done an actual like run through where it was Cincinnati hotel. And then we went from Cincinnati to Indiana. That was a campground. So we had to plan to camp for that. And then we went up to Wrigley. That was a hotel. But we had all of this camping stuff with us from those 2 nights. And then we were in a hotel in Wrigley. And then we went from Wrigley to Michigan. We didn't even book a night, anything for that. We drove straight through the night to Pennsylvania. And that was for the Peach Fest, which is a music festival. You went to
a show in Michigan, but you didn't spend the night right after the show. No. You just kept driving.
Yeah, we got to the show at like 2 p.m. and then hung out on Shakedown. So we essentially just set up camp like out the back of my Subaru, and then we brought it in some chairs until it was time to go into the show. We went into the show, enjoyed the show, got back in the car, and went straight 9 hours through to Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And that was because a lot of the research you have to do is really important, because if you're planning to go to a show, it's really important to know what venue you're going to, because you'll know what time the lots are going to open. You're going to know what time that the doors open. You're going to know how the parking plan works. You're going to know, like, especially with a festival, that as soon as the doors open at a festival, to be able to get an ideal camping spot, you have to get there like right when the doors open. You can't just show up last minute, because then you're going to be in the pit or like in a rocky, gravelly area at the bottom of like a hill. So then your entire campsite is just going to be flooded the whole time you're there.
Oh, that sounds disgusting. So how do you find that information? Is it like readily available when you book or buy the ticket, or?
So a lot of it, like, I remember I literally sat down and I okay, this venue right here, this about it. This venue right here, this about it. And then this festival, this. That information you can find on their websites. The biggest tool that I used for that was Reddit. Like,
really?
Reddit threads have so much advice on them for especially the different band communities. I think that that's a platform people really enjoy using for that.
Mm-hmm.
I also know that there's a lot of Facebook groups that you can use. The one festival I went to, Peach Fest in Pennsylvania, specifically had a Facebook group that gave us so much advice, like make sure you bring this and make sure you bring this, and then make sure you get there right when the doors open. Otherwise, you're gonna be like up on the it's a ski resort, so you're gonna be up on the top of like the Black Diamond, and then to get down to the actual venue stage, it's going to take you 30 minutes if you don't make sure you're there so that you can get within walking distance of it. And what they had was these literal like trailers that you would load like hay on, and they were just like loading people on them to get them down from the top of the mountain to get to the venue area. And
I'm picturing like a very steep incline. I'm sure it's not as drastic as I'm picturing it in my head, but it seems very scary.
It is as drastic as you're imagining. It was the worst experience I've ever had setting up a campsite. I'm not kidding. We had to load up in one trip, like a tent, canopy, all of our stuff, our cooler, all of our chairs, anything that we needed for the campsite. We had to load it up in one go, and only 2 of us were carrying it. And then once you get it off the trailer from the parking lot to like the general camping area, you then have to carry it uphill because they only take you to a certain point, and then get it all set up. And if you can't grab everything in one go, one person has to stand and watch your stuff so it doesn't get stolen while the other person goes up, and then you just take turns going tandem carrying stuff back up the mountain. I'm glad I did it. It was a fun experience, but I will never do that again. Yeah. It was so exhausting. I remember...
Was the campground at least flat? Like, were you trying to set up?
No. Like, I remember putting my drink on my cooler, and it just went like that over the side of the cooler. It just flopped right on the ground. I was like, okay, well, we can't use that as a table, so gotta hold on to our drinks the whole time. But that one was definitely a cool experience, but like I said, I wouldn't do that again. It was so tiring because, like I said, we drove 9 hours through the night, got there at 7 a.m., and then now we have to carry like 200 pounds worth of stuff uphill. Like, we're literally camping on like the Black Diamond slopes, and everyone around us is doing the exact same thing. So like, you can't ask them to help you or whatever. And people were helping us, which was nice about the community and everything. But at the end of the day, they're all like grabbing their stuff and running to go get the better campsite. It was actually kind of crazy to see people going like that for like the campsites. And I know that that's a pretty universal experience when you look at like Bonnaroo and all of that. Unless you get VIP, your campsite's not guaranteed. You just have to get there early enough to get a good campsite.
Which seems like kind of crazy that people would be willing to put all of their eggs in this basket and just hope that it's going to work out when they get there. But these lineups, I think, is what really attracts people. Is it's like, well, I want to see these people so bad that I'm going to make it work. But I have to ask, have you heard of the Fire Fest?
Yes.
Were you tempted to go to that, or was that not really your music genre? No. So have you ever done anything that you were like, this is leaning towards Fire Fest fail, or has it always been a little bit better than that?
So I've always done smaller level festivals because of Fire Fest. And then I've especially not paid for like VIP or anything like that because I want to bring everything that I need and I know that I'm going to need. I don't ever want to like bank on the fact that the festival is going to be put together properly because you hear so many nightmares about the fact that people didn't even bring like a tarp with them and then the campsite.
So I guess I just assume everybody else watches every other documentary that comes out. But if you haven't heard of Fire Fest, just to sum it up for you real quickly, and you might know more than I do being more plugged into this scene, but like it was built as like, this is going to be bigger than Coachella. This is going to be like so nice, so luxury, huge music festival. And it was in the Caribbean? It was supposed to be
on, like one of Pablo Escobar's islands, I think.
Well, it was supposed to be. It was allegedly going to be there.
It wasn't. They didn't advertise the island that they actually used for the festival. They advertised a different island.
Oh, for all their marketing pieces. Yes. So basically, all of these kids, I say kids, but like they were legal adults. But like all of these people paid a bunch of money, and then they get there and, you know, logistically everything's a nightmare as far as like bathrooms to use, places to stay. Everybody always says it was like old FEMA tents. I don't know if that's real, but it, like, just to paint a picture, nothing was luxury.
No.
Nothing was set up. And I think the biggest picture that comes to mind is the cheese on a slice of bread, and
I
that was their
think
like
of
included
like the
meal.
styrofoam lunch meal that people were putting on Twitter.
Yeah.
That is where I always do my research about it first. I would never go to a festival. I think that's a new festival launching.
That does feel scary. And like this guy's doing another one, so like watch out.
Why would anybody pay for that?
I truly don't know. I truly don't know. But
you know,
so,
that guy did a really great job the first time.
I learned to let it go, dude. But like, so you've never had anything that was like that level of, oh my god, this is a nightmare?
Not yet.
Good. I mean, that's fantastic.
Inevitably, something will happen, right?
Well, it sounds like you like take steps to make sure. Like you do your research, you look into the venues ahead of time.
Yes.
Like
I would say the only thing that can really ruin your trip is weather. If you don't plan for the weather properly. And even if it says it's going to be sunny, you need to plan that it's not going to be sunny. Because if it's not sunny, then you have nothing prepared. You have
So how do you prepare for the weather aside from like clothing options?
So when it comes to like tent camping, you just need to make sure you have everything available to stay dry, because once everything's wet, it's not going to dry again, especially if the rain is continuing to come down. I did a smaller level festival where they hold Lost Lands, but it was a Deadhead based. It's called the Dark Star Jubilee.
Oh, I know somebody that goes to Lost Lands every year.
Yeah, and it's a really nice venue. It's in Thornville, Ohio. It's the one with all the dinosaurs everywhere. We got VIP camping there, but that just meant that we could bring our car up to our campsite, which helped out a lot in terms of keeping stuff dry. And that was why we did it, because it was Memorial Day weekend. You don't ever know what the weather is going to be like on Memorial Day weekend in Ohio. So when we got there, it was drizzling. By the end of the first day, it was pouring and it was a mud hole. Everywhere was a mud hole. I only brought a pair of Vans and a pair of Birkenstocks. That was the one thing I was like, I should have planned better. I should have brought boots, because everyone around us was wearing these rain boots. And I'm like, that all of my socks were soaked. It didn't matter what socks I was wearing. So then for the rest of the trip, after it dried up just a little bit, enough that the rain stopped, I didn't have socks at all whatsoever. My feet were filthy. I was constantly like washing them in the little wash stations and everything. And
wash stations?
Yes.
What are the wash stations?
So typically, I mean, you're in a field, right? There's no running water that's going to be readily available. So they'll just have spigots standing up out of the ground, and you turn it on and turn it off whenever you need water. So you want to make sure you're bringing like buckets or like containers you can carry the water in back to your campsite, or have your
Is the water... It's potable, right? Like when they say it's drinkable?
So...
Like, is it though? Or is it like
that's why you want to do research on where you're going, because some of the places don't have proper running water. It's well water, and it's strictly meant for washing.
Gotcha.
And you don't want to use it for anything else. But if you're going to a different kind of, like Peach Fest had drink stations set up for us specifically for water to refill your water bottles in. They also had wash stations. The Dark Star Jubilee in Thornville, where they hold Lost Lands, they did not have any drink stations. You had to buy all of the water unless you brought your own, but they had wash stations available for you to wash any kind of cutlery, your feet, your hands. A lot of people were washing their shoes and letting them dry because, I mean, it was a mud pit. So
do you have people like full-blown showering in these, or is there another spot to do that?
So we paid for VIP, so we had shower stations. Okay. And essentially...
What about the plebes, though? Do you know? Like
they don't. They hippie bath.
So what is hippie bath to you? Because I've got a definition in my head.
It's when you take a box of Cottonelle baby wipes and you hit the pits and the other bits.
Yep, okay, that's my definition as well. And now you know as well, listeners, what a hippie bath is. Or in Ohio, we call them an Indiana shower, and I've heard that in Indiana, they call them Ohio showers. So, you know, take it as you will.
But yeah. I've done a couple of those.
So what's the
unfortunately.
longest stretch that you've been on the road following someone?
That would be not this past summer, the summer before that. I think I was gone for 14 days.
So what did you do as far as like we're talking about like showering? Did you VIP every time? Like what did you do for like all your meals? Like
So you'll essentially plan around the days that you have access to the amenities. So say if I knew that we were going to be camping for more than like a day and a half, then we would plan to buy VIP or buy access to showers. Some of the festivals you can just buy a shower, like the one was on a ski resort, so they had showers and amenities available. So we just planned to buy one shower while we were there, and we strategically placed it. Otherwise, if you're camping and then going to a hotel, then you just plan to shower when you're at the hotel. So the one trip we did, we knew we were only staying at the campsite for one night, so we just showered before we left, and we showered at the next hotel when we got there. So as long as you're planning properly, you're not going to get stuck stinking, I don't think.
Yeah.
But you have to be mindful about what you're planning and how you're doing it.
Definitely. There's a lot more thought that is going into this already than I had honestly even considered. So as far as like your clothing, do you just pack enough that you're always wearing new clothes, or are you trying to like hit a laundromat or stuff like that?
So that's kind of where you get a little dirty, right? Like you can pay for laundry at any of the hotels.
Yeah.
We did not have enough time to do that, like to wait for them to come pick it up and clean it and then bring it back up to the room. Essentially, I just packed enough like interchangeable clothing that worked out. So I brought like one pair of jeans, 2 pairs of shorts, and I have the luxury of having very tiny clothing. So I just was able to bring enough tops that I wasn't having to wear something that was filthy or like extremely soiled from overwearing it.
Yeah.
But that being said, my travel partner, he definitely did not bring enough clothes. Like at a certain point, I was like, please keep your distance. Like you are pretty dirty right now. But there was certain clothing items I did plan for. Like I'm not going to touch this lot until we get through like the Indiana leg of the tour.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that I was allocating the clothing properly. Like there was a certain point where like by the end of it, you're like, I feel so gross right now. But that's the nice thing about traveling and going to see concerts, because you can always just buy a t-shirt from the merch stand and then you got a new shirt. So.
No, and I know a lot of travel agents that do stuff like that too, like sort of plan on like bringing old clothes, throwing them out, and using their like, you know, shopping time to replace their clothes. So that's all so interesting. But so for you, when you are traveling and following, you know, one of these musicians or bands that you really love, is it more about the music, or is it more about being able to travel and go new places, or like a little bit of both?
The best of that is it's both. Like you get to experience new cities, you get to experience the aspect of being like on a road trip. Like for me, that was my vacation. Like I didn't have to go somewhere tropical because every single day we were hitting somewhere new. And I got to experience Chicago a few times strictly based on just going there for a show. I've done Pittsburgh before, just going there for a show. But when you think about it, the show's from like 7 p.m. until like 11. All of that time you have, you can spend it exploring the city.
Yeah.
So it gives you a reason to go to a different area that you might not necessarily think is a destination that you wanted to go to. Like I had never really even thought about visiting Chicago, and now Chicago is one of my favorite cities to go spend time in because I've been there like 5 times in the last couple years, and it's because I went there to go see music and then found out all these like great things that they have to offer in Chicago, and the food there is like so amazingly good. Like any restaurant you go to in Chicago is going to blow all the other restaurants out of the water.
I mean, I always like the food that I manage to eat when I'm traveling. But so would you say that of the places that you've got to travel to, you know, doing this tour thing, that Chicago was your favorite or like a really standout destination? Or are there any other places that you're like, this random town in Boise is amazing? Or you know what I mean? Like,
I would think that just because the concerts I went to in Chicago were at Wrigley, anytime you get to go to a ballpark like that, like it's just really feels important to see it because Wrigley's been there for so long. there's so much history there with that. I liked the way those shows were set up the best, but that was also like different than the rest of the shows. I looked forward to those because they were in the middle of a city. The other shows that I had been to were in amphitheaters. So we're talking about like Blossom. There needs to be a lot of room for parking and then just the venue in general.
Yeah.
So that is where it gets a little bit more rules. So if you want to see a city, you kind of have to pass through the city on your way there.
Blossom's location is like literally, it feels like it's in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
And it is nice that it's all open and it does have the covered like pavilion, but you're right, it's not like going to a show in a downtown city in Chicago or something like that.
Yeah, or even Pittsburgh. Like the shows I recently went to in December of this past year, we went to the University of, it's Peterson Event Center, and I think it's Penn State's.
Okay, I've only been to Pittsburgh like 2 or 3 times and never to anything fun.
But it was in the middle of downtown Pittsburgh. So that was what made it cool, because once you leave the venue, if you're not ready to end the night yet, if you want to go enjoy, a lot of people will do after shows at the different bars in the area. There's no shortage of other things to do that night once the show is over. So you're able to go explore all of these different areas and still feel like you're part of the concert and still feel like it's happening. And vice versa with before the show, they'll do pre-shows at all of these different bars. I went to go see an artist of mine that is my favorite. His name is Billy Strings. He's a bluegrass artist, but they call him Jamgrass because he does a lot more than just bluegrass. And there was a brunch specifically for his show within walking distance of the venue. And
that's really cool.
There was other bands playing like bluegrass music to try to get everybody like hyped up and get everybody out and about in the city to enjoy the city before the concert. So if it's planned properly by like the events and like the bars in the area, it's actually really enjoyable to see a show in the city. The city shows have their own appeal, but in the summertime, the best place to see a band is going to be at an amphitheater. And that is just because you get to be outside and a part of it and everything. So if everything is planned properly, you get to enjoy both of them, which is where I really enjoyed having the camping aspect and the amphitheater aspect, and then also being able to go to Wrigley and enjoy that city aspect of it as well. And then going back to the outdoor aspect of it after Wrigley felt a little refreshing because I was like, okay, everything isn't $25 here now. Like it's actually more affordable now to be here. And that is the one thing you also have to plan around. Okay, I'm going to allot this amount of money for these 3 shows, but I know once I hit Chicago, that's going to skyrocket. So you have to give yourself a bigger budget for that as well. And then plan not to blow through everything that you need for the rest of that leg while you're in the big city, because you can get kind of swept up and away with that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like I budget so hard before I get somewhere, and then I'm real bad once I'm there. I'm like, everything is fine. Take my credit card. But so how does that work as far, because you said 14 days. Did you, like, how did you navigate that with work? Did you just take time off? Or
I work in the service industry, so essentially don't have to worry about time off, but I'm not making any money while I'm taking that time off.
Ooh, yeah.
So that's where you have to plan ahead and save. I know that a lot of people will just do that as their vacation and they'll get PTO for it. So they'll plan properly and use their days up properly. But that being said, that is their vacation. They have no more time off that year.
Yeah.
I have been fortunate enough. None of my request offs have been denied. I've been able to plan around it, but I've always had to really work to save up the money for it, knowing that when I get back, I not only have to plan for what I'm spending on the trip, but what I will have deficit of in that time that I have not been working. So essentially out everything I saved and out 2 weeks worth of work. So you have to really plot and save your pennies essentially for that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like either way, like, you'd have to figure it out one way or the other. But the same can be said for, like, any vacation that you're going to take. Like, if you are part of the working world, then you're going to have to figure that out, like, with your job either way. Have there been any, like, dud destinations where you were like, oh, man, if it wasn't for this great show, I would never come back to this little town or this big city or whatever it is that you're like, I just don't like it here?
I went and saw Bob Weir, who is one of the frontmen of the Grateful Dead and Dead and Company. I went and saw him. I think it was called the Roxy Theater in Pennsylvania. It was a coal mining town. It was The least impressive, like, there was one bar.
Oh, gosh.
And it didn't open until after the show started.
Oh.
So we traveled all the way there, got there, and then ended up, and it was like, I don't want to say it wasn't a safe area, but it definitely was like, you're like looking around a little bit to make sure. So we walked down to this convenient mart, and we bought a 12-pack of Michelob Ultras, I believe it was, and we just ended up sipping on them, like,
where?
in my car, I think it was. But we were in the back seat because we knew that we would get in a lot of trouble if we drank them in the front seat.
Yeah, well,
so
you said Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
I know, like, their alcohol laws are a little different, too, in general, as far as where you can buy. So I'm sure they wouldn't be like, oh, no, front seat of the car, crack one open.
Yeah,
like...
no, we didn't plan that one properly because if we had known there was no bars in the area, we could have brought lawn chairs and stuff to just kind of camp out and hang out and wait for the show to start.
Yeah.
That one, it was cold out and there was nothing going on around it. We're in this little coal mining town. It's hilly everywhere you're trying to walk to. It's like you're exercising. There's very interesting individuals like hanging out everywhere. So it got to the point where we're like, we're just going to hang out in the car until it's time to go get in line for the show.
Yeah. Okay. So bummer on that one.
Yeah. That one wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it definitely, like, I will pass on that theater again if it comes up in the roundup on a show list or something like that.
Are there any destinations that you're kind of like checking your, you know, tours for the bands that you love to see if they're gonna hit like isn't Red Rock like a really famous?
So there's the Gorge in that area. I always get mixed up on the venue locations. I just know the names of the venue. Red Rocks is like an ultimate bucket list because
it's an all outdoor venue.
Yeah. So it's all outdoors and then it's all the natural red rock is what's carved into.
And that's Arizona?
That one is
New Mexico?
Denver.
Denver. So Red Rock is in Denver.
And then I think the Gorge is in Washington.
Okay.
The Gorge is in Washington, and then the Caverns are in Tennessee. So these are 3 like natural-based amphitheaters that have allowed the acoustics to be a lot better.
Yeah,
from
that's
my understanding.
so incredible.
I've never been to any of them, but just going to any of them.
I didn't even know where it was. So
any of them would be hitting like a big bucket list thing for me because those are the shows that the artists plan around specifically to give a special performance at as well because the ticket price on those ones obviously is going to be a little bit more expensive there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then there's the Ryman in Tennessee, in Nashville. That's a historical auditorium. So they'll do lotteries. You can't even buy a ticket to that show. You have to buy a ticket to get put into the lottery. And then if you win the lottery, then you're allowed to buy a ticket for it.
Wow.
So because the seating is so limited, they would sell it like that. There's no way. So they have to break it down in a way that it's actually accessible to the people that really want to try to get tickets for it. So
yeah, I'm surprised they're that fair about it and not just like silent auctioning off these like really expensive tiny seats.
I'm sure there is a certain aspect of like behind the scenes that we don't know about a certain amount of tickets.
I mean, if you have enough money, you can do just about anything.
Yes. So
not that you should, but you can.
But you can get away with it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But there's been a couple times, like, I've been in Tennessee. I was in Tennessee 2 years ago, and I was in Nashville, and my favorite artist, Billy Strings, was playing at the Ryman, like, 2 days before I got there. And I was trying to figure out a way to, like, just go there early and be able to get there. I was trying to find tickets for that. No. Thousands of dollars. Thousands of dollars resale. So unless you want to pay thousands of dollars resale, you have to go into the lottery. And that is a painstaking, time-consuming process. And you have to buy tickets for other shows in that tour to even be able to qualify to go into the lottery. So you can't just get a ticket for venue like that one.
I did not realize that there were some venues that had all these intricate things that you'd have to do to be considered to be able to attend.
Yeah, to even just buy a ticket for it, you have to, like, jump over a river and answer the troll's riddle under the bridge.
Right.
It gets very complicated. So, but those are the people that they want to see them in that venue because it holds a special meaning to them and they're willing to do it. They don't mind doing it. So
hey, I mean, more power to you, right?
Yeah.
So any final words of advice for somebody who would be looking to do this for the first time?
If you're camping, bring zip ties and scissors.
Zip ties and scissors,
I'm
people.
not kidding.
You heard it here first. How come, though?
So there are two things you don't think you're going to need at all whatsoever. You're like, that's so silly. And then if you have them, all of a sudden people are coming up to your like campsite going, so I heard you have scissors over here.
It's like having gum in 5th grade.
No,
it's
it
like...
actually is. There was a couple times where word got around that my campsite had scissors and zip ties and stuff, and it's funny because it's something that people are like, oh, I have string. A zip tie is so much quicker and easier. I think we ended up zip tying this guy's entire tent back together one time because his tent fell apart. Well, the string's not going to do much for you, but... No, but other than that, just plan appropriately and budget appropriately. Don't put yourself in a hole, and don't put yourself in a car to get you somewhere without knowing how you're going to get home. Because there are a lot of people that go on these dead tours and they get excited and they do some stuff. They stay up way too late. They get in a car with somebody and they show up at the next town over. I've seen it. And then they're on the phone. I don't know where I am. I don't know how I got here. Like, I need a ride home from this show. And then they get stuck on the tour and it's a circus. So keep your head on your shoulders straight. Stick with the people that you came with and plan appropriately.
She just described an active nightmare for me. Like, basically, it's like willingly floating around and just hoping that, like, hitchhiking,
And people do it.
No, I mean, I guess if that, no, I can't in any way wrap that up in a bow that makes it sound like it's okay. I'm gonna judge you if you do that. I hope it's gonna work out for you. I really do. I hope it's all gonna be fine. But to me, that sounds so stupid. So make good choices. Make good choices. Yeah. Well, Kate, thank you so much for coming on. I knew nothing about this topic before we sat down, and it seems so interesting. And really, it seems like there's a lot of heart and effort and planning that goes into it, but it seems like it's always really worth it.
It's really worth it. People don't just do it to do it. They do it because they want to do it. So if you're even thinking about it, if you feel like it would be worth it, it is worth it. I promise it is. Even though you're going to put blood, sweat, and tears into it, I always just do it. Buy the ticket.
Yeah. You know, I'm trying to get better about that in general. Just do it. Like, the money will, in general, figure itself out. I mean, I'm not going to bankrupt myself and go into debt, but also, like, it's okay to spend some money every now and then. You know what I mean?
You're buying an experience that you're never going to forget for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You're going to forget how much money you had in your bank account when you were 28 years old in December. Right. You are going to remember that show you went to, and you're going to carry that with you for the rest of your life. You'll tell your kids about it. So that's where my mindset is on it. I would much rather enjoy the life I'm currently living than be planning for a life I might live at some point. I'd rather have the memories than the money.
Yeah, that's so true. So we're going to end the show so I can go blow whatever's in my bank account. No. But if you have, done this before, or if you have more questions, share your feedback, share your thoughts, share your stories with us in the comments or anywhere on social media using the hashtag Travel Stories Unpacked, because we would love to hear from you. We'll be back next Friday with new stories, new opinions, new guests, and all things travel. This podcast is brought to you by KHM Travel Group, a leading host agency for independent travel agents, and you can learn more at khmtravel.com.